Good evening, I'm Aaox. Aaox says it right there next to my channel icon. Come on guys, not that hard. You know what is hard? Elaborating on the wonderful little oddity that is KonoSubarashii Sekai in Shukufuko wo. You wouldn't think to note it by the title, but apparently this one's a light novel adaptation. Bizarrely, the thing that hit me the most about it when I sat down to type out the review for it is how limited the scope of the evaluation I could conjure up was. The dull, aching void of potential critique I feel when looking at the broad expanse of charming idiocy that is KonoSuba's current 2 seasons is a perplexing one, as I did think the show was fun, but it's striking for all its merits. There's just not a lot of material for me to work with critically. I know as far as opening statements for a review goes, that's not exactly stellar, but bear with me. Let's go by the book and just get a plot introduction rolling before we dive into the more nuanced critique that is me sitting here and going, for 7.5 minutes. Meet Kazuma. He's super dead because he soiled himself as a truck was about to hit him. In the waiting room for reincarnation, Aqua, a goddess with a penchant for alcohol and also not wearing any underwear, explains to him that he's going to be transported into a fantasy world and offers him one boon to take with him of his choosing. Much to her chagrin, Kazuma chooses to take her with him out of spite, and so the deadpan smartass jerk and the alcoholic goddess are, everyone together now, thrown into a fantasy world. There they meet Megumin, a mage who refuses to learn any other kind of magic beyond explosion magic, which she can only cast once a day that also utterly incapacitates her, and Darkness, a crusader who misses every swing. She's also a masochist so hard, she's now actually one of the few things above diamonds on the Mohs scale. So we hit the ground running with cliché, only to have it subverted, and then we pick ourselves up with cliché, only to have it subverted again. The rest of the series follows in a fairly logical progression where traditional fantasy/MMO fare is presented, only to then be corrupted by Kazuma and his cabal of screwballs who generally ruin more lives than they save. It's a Tsukomi bokeh parodical comedy that incurs its humor through throwing cliché through the wood chipper and arranging the debris in funny little shapes, and it pulls that off with aplomb. Of course, without characters to drive this thing would be freewheeling off the narrative cliff, so it's extremely important to note how fantastic the dynamic is between our 4 leading sociopaths. The interplay here is fantastic, even if there's not a substantial amount of progression episode to episode. Kazuma, Darkness, Aqua, and Megumin hit that sweet spot of characterization for me where they all just click. They complement each other well, their personalities bounce off of each other marvelously, and the unit feels so cohesive and fun that you could watch them sit around doing nothing for half an episode and it'd still be funnier than most other comedy shows I've seen. In fact, I'm pretty sure they actually do that. There's no one real substantial outlier, although if I had to say one, it'd be Darkness, and the creator's tendency to rely on her masochism for cheap jokes, which are less reliant on comedic setup and timing than they are just getting a big foam finger out and pointing to her character model as she writhes on screen whilst the writers shout, "She's getting off to being abused." That's pretty funny, right? And you know, it can be, from time to time. I feel like they abused it more in the 2nd season. No, not that kind of abuse, that's a hilarious little bit of verbal congruency. One of the first things you're going to notice about KonoSuba if you've somehow dodged the comically timed bullet is, of course, how everyone looks like a burn victim. Alright, sorry, that's uncalled for. It's certainly got an art style that's, let's be the annoying paternal figure who doesn't want to come off as too harsh and call it interesting. It's entirely intentional on the part of the chief animation director, Koichi Kikuta, and whilst the expressive, some might say over-expressive facial animation and body language do lend the show a certain unique feel and give it a lot of questionable charm, I do unfortunately have to bold, italicize, and embiggen by about 100 points the questionable in that sentence. Some may love it, some may hate it, some may feel indifferent about it, but like it or not, it's definitely one of KonoSuba's main talking points. The fluid art style does lend itself to a more comedic tone, and the show wouldn't be what it is without it, but the show's the art is there. It's ugly, alright? It's kind of ugly from time to time. But, you know, let's get real. Let's get real here for a second. We can all be a bit ugly from time to time, can't we? The instances where it's not a f***ing disgrace to the name of animation can actually come across as a bit insincere, however, especially when the show reaches for action highs. When KonoSuba's cracking jokes every second about the fantasy genre and then suddenly decides to play a trope straight, I found myself sitting there more often than not going, where's the joke? And that may be a problem on part of my expectations, but especially considering they do, a few times, subvert the action highs. The entire framing device of the second season is a subversion of the action sequence that ended the first season, for example, when a scene ends without a punchline. It feels as though a comedian had just introduced a guest, then that guest had proceeded to break down into racking tears whilst giving a heartfelt address, and then you look to the host as he's wiping a tear out of his eye before he then starts clapping softly. And as the curtain gently falls, the audience sits in silence, asking, is this funny? Did I miss something? Was there a joke in there somewhere? Another sticking point I'd call out about the show would be the pretty negative view it seems to present of women, between the masochist who gets off to abuse, the haughty, alcoholic, self-obsessed idiot, and the... well, there's nothing much wrong with Megumin. Bless her. Worth noting, the men are generally depicted as self-serving, vainglorious cowards as well, and the female cast possesses more personality and charm than most other female leads in similar shows, so it's not as though there's a horrendous double standard. You know, most of the time. Jesus Christ. Speaking of personality and charm, apparently Kazuma's occasional "Hi, Kazuma desu" moments were ad-libbed and would throw off the other voice actors, but the director liked them so much that they kept them going. I mean, that's pretty funny. That's a good little bit of consistent character comedy. It's a very funny... God damn it. See, everyone already likes KonoSuba. Reviewers more popular than I have put together more effective analyses than I have, and the general consensus on this one, at least, seems to be generally positive almost straight across the board, and that's the biggest issue I'm finding as I put this together. KonoSuba sets out to be funny, and it be's funny. I like it, everyone else likes it, it's just a good, dumb, light-hearted comedy show that fulfills what it sets out to do and doesn't do a lot more than that. It's the anime equivalent of a Phillips head screwdriver. It's a fantastic show, but there's just not a lot of critical meat to sink one's teeth into. It's junk food to be consumed at one's leisure, and that's fantastic, but it does leave rather slim pickings for insight. Speaking of eating though, did anyone else notice this show is for vor what Quentin Tarantino films are for foot fetishes? Is it just me? A lot of people get themselves ate in KonoSuba. For what it's worth, I watched the second season with a couple of friends, and that made the experience even better for me, so maybe give that a shot. It's definitely something you'll get more out of if you're sharing it with other people, in my opinion, but hey, even if you're watching it solo, you're pretty much guaranteed to enjoy it, and in a medium full of relentless garbage trash, that's really pretty special.